Thank you. So this year's Momentum Award winner is Dr. Meghan Azad. Dr. Azad is a professor of pediatrics and child health at the University of Manitoba, a Tier 2 Canada Research Chair in Early Nutrition and Developmental Origins of Health and Disease. She holds a PhD in biochemistry and medical genetics and an MSc in epidemiology. Dr. Azad's research is focused on the role of infant nutrition and the microbiome in child growth, development, and resilience. She co-directs the Manitoba Interdisciplinary Lactation Centre and leads the International Milk Composition Consortium. Research in her Thrive Discovery Lab is funded by the Canadian Institutes of Health Research, the US NIH, the Canada Foundation for Innovation, and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Dr. Azad is a fellow of the CFAR Humans and Microbiome Program and an elected member of the Royal Society of Canada College of New Scholars. She has received the International Human Milk Genomics Mid-Career Investigator Award and was named among the top 100 most powerful women and Canada's top 40 under 40, and received the prestigious Stacey Prize for research in the natural sciences. Dr. Meghan Azad, the 2024 Canada Gairdner Momentum Awardee, will be presenting her presentation on human milk, the original superfood, and personalized medicine.
All right. Thank you for the very kind introduction. It is my pleasure to be here and share with you some of our research on human milk. And it's, I think, a big win for this field that we're on the same stage as next generation sequencing and cancer immunotherapies. So that for me is a hugely exciting honor. So in the next 25 minutes, I'm going to share with you why I think human milk is the ultimate personalized medicine. This is a buzzword we hear a lot about. A quote that I love that has inspired me greatly is this one: "Human breast milk is not only a perfectly adapted nutritional supply for the infant, but probably the most specific personalized medicine that he or she is likely to receive, given at a time when gene expression," and the microbiome, I added that part, "is being fine-tuned for life." So this quote comes from Cesar Victoria, who led the Lancet series on breastfeeding in 2016. This was a time when I was just getting started, finding my ground, and deciding what I wanted to focus on. And actually, he was given a Gairdner Prize in 2017, the year after. And that really inspired me to continue in this field. I actually paid my own way out here to Toronto for Gairdner Week in 2017, specifically to hear Dr. Victoria's lecture and to meet him. And so you can imagine what a surreal feeling it is to be here just 7 years later on the same stage. I think Dr. Victoria and I would have a similar motivation for studying breast milk. And it's shown very beautifully in this map. So you can see here that in some countries in the world, up to 18% of infant deaths are attributable to suboptimal breastfeeding. That's huge. That means that by supporting breastfeeding, we could save many lives. It's been estimated in that Lancet series that over 800,000 lives a year could be saved if we were able to support optimal breastfeeding around the world. Of course, we live in Canada, and that's nice and dark blue, meaning that not many babies here are dying because of suboptimal breastfeeding. So that's a good thing, but it doesn't mean it's not still important to understand and study breastfeeding in the context of Canada right here at home. This is a pamphlet that we give out to pregnant moms in my home province of Manitoba, outlining 8 great reasons to breastfeed your baby. And I won't go through them all today, but as a health researcher, I'm most interested in number 3. Breastfed babies are healthier. For example, they have a lower risk of sudden infant death syndrome, of respiratory tract infections, of type 1 diabetes, and if we look later in life, of obesity into adolescence and adulthood. So as a basic scientist, I want to know why. Why is it that breastfeeding confers all these health benefits? And I also want to point out that the answer to that question can help all babies, no matter how they're fed. And by helping all babies, we can help all families and all societies be healthier. So to answer that question, we've got to think about the milk. I mentioned it's a superfood. Another overused buzzword, perhaps, but I think if one food deserves that label, it is human milk. It contains all the nutrients a baby needs to grow and develop for the first months of life. But it's more than a food. We could think of breast milk also as a baby's first vaccine. So a new baby has a very immature immune system. It can't generate the antibodies it needs to fend off infections. It gets that from its mother's breast milk. We talked about personalized medicine. Here's a picture for you. This is breast milk from the same mother a few days apart. You can tell with your eyes that it's a different color. And if you looked at it with a microscope or other technologies, you'd see that the molecules in there are very different too. That's because the milk is adapting to the needs of that baby when it gets sick, which is incredible. Breast milk is also dynamic, so it doesn't just change if a baby gets sick. It changes day by day, month by month as the baby grows and its needs are changing. It even changes from the beginning to the end of one feeding and from morning to night. So you can imagine how that would be difficult to replicate in a one-size-fits-all artificial formula. Human milk is also tailor-made for tiny humans. We don't think about that, but all mammals make milk. That's actually what defines us as mammals. But the milk for every species is different. It's optimized for the babies of that species. So if you think of a baby human and a baby cow, they are pretty different. A baby cow is up wobbling around in the first hours of life, so it needs milk with high protein to build muscles. Whereas a baby human is not walking around for months. It's actually developing most of its brain and devoting its energy to that purpose. So human milk is high in specific fats that are important for brain development. We could talk all day about milk for different species, but I will move on. And comment also that it's not just optimized for the baby, but also for the baby's microbes. So I studied the microbiome using actually next generation sequencing technology. We sequence microbes to understand who's there. And so we think of ourselves as full of organs, a heart, lungs, intestines. We actually have millions and trillions of microbes on our bodies. We actually have more microbial cells than human cells on our bodies, and they're doing lots of really important things. We need our visible organs and our invisible microbiome working together for us to function as a complete human. And we think a lot about the gut microbiome. This is where the majority of our microbes live, and they do very important things. They help train our immune system to understand what we should react to and what we should not. They make vitamins that we can't make on our own. They fend off the bad bacteria, and many more things. So it's maybe not surprising then that the microbiome and disruption of the microbiome is linked to gut diseases like colitis, but not only gut diseases. The more we learn about the microbiome, the more we realize it's actually linked to almost every health outcome, including cancer and liver disease and lung disease. So if human milk is feeding that microbiome, I think that's pretty important. Maybe it's even a 9th great reason to breastfeed your baby. And so this is some of the research that I did as a postdoc, my very first paper on the microbiome, where we showed that babies who were breastfed had a different microbiome. And a few years later, this paper came out from a larger study from colleagues in the Teddy study, and they looked at many different factors and said which of these are explaining or shaping the microbiome of babies. And they looked at many things like probiotics and antibiotics that you would expect would change the microbiome, and they do. But what changes it much more, as you can see here, is breast milk. By far, the single biggest factor shaping the microbiome of babies. So again, I wanted to know why. And that's what I focused on when I started my own lab in 2014. And so to understand why, we have to think about what's in the breast milk. These are 2 pictures giving you the same message, which is that the ingredient list of breast milk is a whole lot longer than the ingredient list of formula. And in fact, this list is not even complete because we're still discovering new things in breast milk. And I know you can't read these tiny words, you can read these ones, and you can see that, of course, formula has all the nutrient building blocks a baby needs, but on top of that, breast milk has antibodies that I mentioned before, hormones, growth factors. And I'd say this figure needs an update because it doesn't contain 2 of my favorite things when it comes to the microbiome, which is probiotic or good beneficial bacteria, and prebiotic oligosaccharides that feed those good bacteria. So these are naturally found in breast milk. And if you're thinking to yourself, but Megan, formulas these days have probiotics and prebiotics. It's true, but it is not the same. There's 1 or 2 probiotics, 1 or 2 prebiotics added to some brands of formula, but we know there are hundreds of probiotics and hundreds of different prebiotics in human milk. So in my team and in the field in general, we're starting to think of human milk as a system of all these many bioactive components. And in the past, it was studied in buckets. So the nutritionists would study the vitamins, and the endocrinologists would study the hormones. But the reality is these things are all mixed together in milk, and that's how the baby receives them. So that's probably how we should study them. We also recognize that human milk is a system embedded in another system, which is the mother-milk-infant triad. Many people talk about the mother-infant dyad, but we're recognizing that breast milk is an important and distinct 3rd component. And it's not just a one-way street. It's not that moms are giving milk to their babies and that's it. Babies are actually communicating back to their mothers through the act of breastfeeding, and that's super important. And then all of this is embedded within yet another system, the physical and social environment that can shape breast milk composition, that can influence a mother's ability or decision to breastfeed. And then this all together, of course, influences the development of many systems in the baby. So thinking of all these layers of systems and data is complex and requires big teams. You've heard that a lot today. My team is the child cohort study. So a lot of the research I've done has been embedded in this great Canadian study that was started back around 2009 when I was just getting into the field. It's a pregnancy cohort of over 3,500 families recruited from 4 provinces in Canada, including here in Toronto, as well as Manitoba, where I'm now based, Alberta, where I did my postdoc, and Vancouver. And so many researchers representing many disciplines are involved in the child study. It was founded to really answer the question of how genes and the environment influence child health and development. Very broadly, initially with a focus on asthma and allergies, which are so much more prevalent today than in previous generations. But as the study goes on, we start studying other outcomes. And these babies are actually now 12 years old, and we're still following them, which is pretty incredible. And so the research I showed you earlier on the microbiome and breastfeeding was part of the child study. So I've been part of the study for that long. And what I'll tell you about is some of our latest research from the child study on breastfeeding and the microbiome. This came out just last month, a really exciting paper where we took a step further from that initial research just showing that breastfeeding was important to the microbiome. We did that actually in 24 babies at the very beginning of the study. This latest research involves over 2,000 babies. And what we showed was that breastfeeding is really important for the microbiome, and that does have an influence on health. So a normal baby is going to gradually collect more microbes as it gets older and gets exposed to more things. And that gradual timing is really important. So we saw that babies who were breastfed had this slow and paced expansion of their microbiome. But babies who stopped breastfeeding too early had this premature acceleration of their microbiome development, and that was linked to a higher risk of asthma. We looked at this not only in the gut, but also in the nose of the babies in collaboration with our colleagues here in Toronto and a computational biologist in New York. So the message here is that timing is everything. A healthy microbiome is not just about having the right microbes. It's about having them arrive in the right order at the right time. And breast milk is really what drives this timing. So of course, we have more questions. How does that work? How is it that breast milk is driving the timing of the microbiome development? For that, we want to look at the components of breast milk. So here's an updated version of the figure I showed you earlier. It does have the pre and probiotics over there with formula. So my dream with a child study was to, one by one, analyze all these different building blocks of breast milk. And I did that pretty slowly at first, with pretty small grants. And a lot of this work is published. You're able to leverage that work and convince people that we need to look at all the blocks all together in a system. And so we were funded by the Gates Foundation to develop the International Milk Composition Consortium and really start analyzing that whole rainbow of milk. So the IMIC Consortium involves a collaboration with scientists and research participants here in Canada, but also in Burkina Faso, in Pakistan, and in Tanzania. And we're trying to understand how human milk is similar and how it's different in different parts of the world. And so we're doing that in over 1,000 mother-infant pairs, and we are looking at the whole rainbow of milk. We're also working with data scientists. When you generate that much data, you can't use traditional statistics. So we have experts in machine learning and AI working with us to unravel this complex tangle of data around human milk and to see how it relates to infant health and development in different parts of the world. And so this is where I'll say, come to my talk tomorrow to hear more, because we have limited time today, but I will share some preliminary results from the IMIC study, and I think you'll be amazed. So I'll switch gears a little to talk about MILK, the Manitoba Interdisciplinary Lactation Center. So this is a group that I founded in Manitoba to really think more broadly about milk. So we're establishing an infant feeding database where we hope to collect data on all infants in Manitoba to understand better how they're fed, because that isn't done well, and we can't fix something we don't measure. We're also starting a human milk biorepository, asking moms to donate milk for research to understand more about how it might predict their own health, maternal health, which is an exciting new area, and of course how it links to their infant's health. These data are all linked into our administrative databases in Manitoba to generate a really powerful and unique platform for milk research. And we have a milk club. This is where every month we meet between researchers and clinicians who care about breastfeeding to think about what new research needs to be done and to share the latest results so they can get it out to the patients and practitioners that need to know about it. We meet every month, and we've invited by popular demand people from anywhere to join us. So it's not just Manitoba anymore, and if you're interested, I encourage you to reach out. Some of the things we do at Milk include initiatives to recognize that breastfeeding is a societal responsibility. It's not on individual moms to breastfeed. They need support. And so we're doing things like developing courses to teach healthcare practitioners about breastfeeding and lactation, because unfortunately, so far, that's not a mandatory part of their training. We're also generating videos for the general public to get them aware and excited about breast milk. We've generated policies for the Parliament, briefings to influence policies in Parliament. I'd love to generate policies. And we're doing events for the general public. So we had an AMA on Reddit for the first time this year. Super cool to see what the general public is wondering and asking about breastfeeding. We've established a milk mentorship program in Manitoba. So partners of ours in the Milk Club have established this program where a new mom who might be struggling with breastfeeding can get paired up with a mom with experience and get the help she needs. Maybe she doesn't need to go to a doctor or a community support where that is limited, but she can have a peer mentor leader through it. And 2 of our members of the Milk Club are founding members of the North American Board of Breastfeeding and Lactation Medicine. It might surprise you to know that this didn't exist until 2 years ago. There was no medical specialty in lactation. There's a medical specialty for every other part of your body, but not for the mammary gland. And so that's changing, which is really exciting. So in terms of what's next for our team and our group at Milk, I'm excited to do more milk multi-omics. So I've talked to you about the child study. We're doing this in other cohorts and also in the area of premature infants with collaborators actually here in Toronto, which I think is really exciting. We're studying colostrum. So colostrum, also known as the original liquid gold, is the very first milk that a mother produces in the first couple of days, and it is this golden color. It's because it's so different in composition. It's full of those antibodies and many other things. And so we've got new projects to study colostrum in different areas of the world, how it influences newborn health, and also looking at antenatal colostrum. So moms can actually start producing this before the baby is even born, and we're interested in the properties of that antenatal colostrum. We're also wanting to do more around breastfeeding support, so expanding that milk mentor program to rural and remote areas of the province, starting a pump loan program. So breast pumps, unfortunately, are not covered by insurance in Canada, something else we're aiming to change. But until then, we want to have a program so that any mom, whether or not she can afford a breast pump, can have access to one. And we want to do more in the area of knowledge translation. So we're working on a mini-series or a documentary about breast milk and breastfeeding. We're looking at ways to educate kids about breastfeeding early in their school careers. Now, I mentioned breast milk is a superfood for babies, but something pretty cool to think about is that maybe breast milk's benefits are not limited to babies. Of course, they should be first in line to get breast milk, but I think there's a lot we can learn from breast milk and translate to people of all ages. And so this is an interview I did recently with The Economist, and we talked about projects like this one. This isn't my work, but it's really exciting. So people who get a bone marrow transplant, they have to first wipe out their immune system so that they don't reject that transplant. Obviously, wiping out your immune system could have some side effects. And so someone had the clever idea that, babies don't have an immune system, but they get it from breast milk. So maybe we could give breast milk to these patients, or maybe parts of the breast milk to help them recover better. Another example of how breast milk could benefit everyone is irritable bowel syndrome. So this is a disruption of the gut microbiome. We know that breast milk is tailored to feed a healthy microbiome in babies, so maybe we could extract some of those components and help treat people with IBS in adulthood. So I think we have a lot to learn and be inspired about from breast milk. I want to switch gears a little and tell you a story of how I got here, a very brief one. Yesterday, I told the whole story, and I think that's recorded somewhere on YouTube, but I'll give you the highlights. Started as a patient, actually. So my parents are here in the audience today. When I was about 10 years old, I had breathing trouble when I was playing soccer, and they took me to the hospital. I got diagnosed with asthma and enrolled in a study. And that experience of being in a study inspired me to think, maybe that's what I'd like to do studies and help other people be healthy. So then a bunch of stuff happened. I went to school, and in 2014, I eventually started my own lab at the University of Manitoba, and it was just me. A few more things happened. I did some more school, got a few awards. In 2019, I founded Milk, and I got into CFAR, which was mentioned earlier. And then today, 2024, I'm here receiving this award, and my lab now has 14 people. But the point I want to make for you today, without going into all the details, is that that looks like a straight line, but actually, it was more like this. So sometimes you maybe feel like you're taking a step back, but that is totally normal, and that is okay. So 2 examples for me are that I did my first degree in biochemistry. I thought that's what I wanted to do, and then I figured out along the way that maybe that wasn't my favorite, but I discovered epidemiology, population health, and I loved it. So it felt for me a bit like, did I waste 5 years doing this PhD? But looking back, I see that that wasn't a waste. You just heard what my research is about. It's about microbiomes and biomolecules in breast milk. So that totally makes use of my previous training, but also the new training. So what might feel like a step back isn't necessarily. Another example is when I finished my postdoc and I'd looked and studied the gut microbiome of babies, I thought, I'll keep doing that. But I was told, Megan, there are many more people in line ahead of you to get their hands on the stool samples from the child study. So I had to think for a moment, and I decided, well, I love this child study. Maybe there's something else I can do. And there were freezers full of breast milk that nobody wanted. So I took that on. But as you can see now, I'm linking it back to the gut microbiome. So again, what feels like a step back or a barrier might not turn out to be such a barrier after all. So there are many possible paths, not one right path. And it's okay to change your direction or your destination. This has also taught me the importance of mentorship, teams, and networking, because none of this research was done alone. I had lots of important mentors along the way, and you never just know what person in your network might be able to open the next door for you. The other thing that's hidden in this map is a lot of failures. So we talk a lot about our successes, our big papers, our big grants, but there's lots of failures for everyone on their way to success. And so everything I highlighted here in red is something that didn't go right the first time around. I had to apply a second time, sometimes a third and a fourth time before it worked out. And probably my favorite failure on this slide is my first grant on breastfeeding, where one of the anonymous reviewers made this comment, that it is highly unlikely that any magic component in breast milk will ever be found. Of course, I did not use the word magic because I'm a scientist, but that was the result. And early in your career, you can imagine that feels pretty disappointing. I thought maybe I should do something else, but you'll notice that was just 1 year before I saw Cesar Victoria win the Gairdner for breastfeeding research. So I kept at it, and I'm here today having this work recognized. So I think you don't give up just because one person tells you it's a bad idea, even if they feel like a really influential person. So failures are an inevitable and an essential part of success. I want to finish with one last quote. So, of course, we all know about the Nobel Prize. In that same Lancet series on breastfeeding, Keith Hansen, the Vice President for Human Development of the World Bank, said, "If breastfeeding did not already exist, someone who invented it today would deserve a dual Nobel Prize in medicine and economics." And so, of course, breastfeeding can't receive the Nobel Prize because it does already exist. But the Gairdner has now recognized 2 researchers for human milk research, breastfeeding research, so maybe that's not such a crazy prediction from Mr. Hansen. So I want to finish by thanking all the people who contributed to this work. Of course, my lab, members past and present, the child cohort study, the members of Milk, and the IMIC Consortium, all of our many funders, and because today is a special kind of day, I also want to thank the many, many colleagues, mentors, and family who have supported me to get here today. Some of them are in the audience, my parents, my partner. This doesn't happen alone. We need teams, we need mentors, we need family and support. So thank you. I appreciate you all being here, and here is where you can find me. We have no questions today, but you can reach out online, and I really appreciate the Gairdner Foundation for recognizing this award and providing this opportunity.